Hello everyone! Today I'm reviewing The Alchemist, which was the next book on my book thing, because I don't really have a lot of other content to make. I can't really go outside and dance because there's lots of pollen and I can't breathe. I'm sure you can hear it. Also, I'm working about 60 hours a week and I've got weird hours, so other things aren't really possible, but I've been reading a lot, so be prepared for more book content. Also, studying. I really like taking notes. Sounds weird, but my iPad makes taking notes so pretty and fun. So there's that. I've been sucked into the study note Instagram world and I can't escape. So the two things happen, well, I guess three things happening in my life are excessive work, excessive social media, but not like regular social media that motivates me to learn things, and reading. So self-improvement? I don't know. Anyway, I read The Alchemist by what's his name? Paulo Coelho. Anyway, really good book. I really enjoyed it. It like touched a part of me in a non-creepy way that sort of inspired me to both write more stories and also just see the world differently. It was also fairly religious, and I am not a religious person, and it mentioned God and like a whole bunch of other biblical stories that I'm not familiar with. I feel like with all of the allusion? I get those two mixed up. All the references to the Bible probably had subtle meanings that I just didn't pick up, and there's probably a bunch of other things where if I had been a religious person, I probably would have gotten more from the book than what I did get. I do feel like the book is trying to tell me something in a language I just don't understand and I just didn't pick up. It's definitely going to be something I'm going to read again just because I want to understand it more, and I feel like it's one of those books that the more you read it, the more you gain from it. So I will be reading it again. I also want to look into more works by the author because he's written a lot of books and I really enjoyed this book. It reminded me a little bit of a cross between The Little Prince and The Road, which are two very different books. It also reminded me of the Phoenix Rising series, the Elisa's Quest, Elisa's Odyssey, and World's End, that series. It reminded me a little bit of that. And I'm sure everyone draws inspiration from everything else. So I'm sure inspiration for those things came from maybe this, maybe something that drew inspiration from this, maybe not anything similar. They both drew inspiration from a different outside source. But I like seeing the similar concepts between those things. But yeah, essentially what happens in the book, spoilers, I feel like I have something on my face. Spoilers, we never learn the main character's name. We never really learn anybody's name. I think we learn one name. Yeah, I'm pretty sure we only learn one name. It's like Malzachek. I don't know, I read it. I don't know if anybody read Harry Potter before watching Harry Potter, but like Hermione's name? How'd y'all pronounce that? Because it wasn't Hermione. It was very similar to Victor Crumb. I called her Hermione. And then her name just became a symbol and I was like, oh, it's that character again. Anyway, so we don't have anybody's name except the king's. Okay, so the story basically follows the boy, and we never learn his name, but the boy is a shepherd who has a recurring dream of finding treasure near the pyramids of Egypt. Yeah, and so he goes and sees a gypsy who tells him to follow his dream and to give her 1/10 of his treasure when he finds it, if he finds it. And he's like, oh yeah, okay, whatever, like I don't think I'm gonna do that. And then he meets a king who he doesn't know is a king because he's like covered up his gold chest plate that shows that he's a king, and the king is like giving him advice and stuff, telling him what to do, essentially can read his mind. I feel like I don't think he's God, but I think everything's created by God, but I think he's a messenger from God, I think, because he knows too much about the boy to ever just be a random king. And he's like, for the price of 1/10 of your flock, I will help you get to Africa and start your, what's it called? Personal journey. No, personal treasure? Find personal treasure? Something along those lines. And so the boy thinks about it and then decides to trust the king. And then the king's name is the only name we learn, and I think it's Malzachek. And he goes to Africa. He gives 10% of his flock to the king. He probably doesn't need it. And in return, the king gives him 2 stones, a black one and a white one, Umin and Thumin, which are essentially yes or no. It's like a magic 8-ball, but from God. And he goes across the strait, or whatever it is that separates Spain from Africa. He goes across and he sort of loses hope when he realizes that he can no longer speak the language, but he's always wanted to travel, so good on him. He meets someone, and that someone steals everything that he owns, and he sort of gives up hope, and then he finds a crystal merchant, sells crystal on the top of a hill. The crystal merchant speaks all languages, or most languages, a lot of languages, and so the boy goes in, they have a conversation. The boy says, I'll clean your crystal if you give me a sandwich. And maybe it got translated weird, but that's what he said. And so the merchant's like, yeah, okay, whatever. And so the boy cleans the crystal, and then the merchant's like, you didn't have to do that. The Quran says I have to feed anybody who's hungry. Let's go eat. So they go eat. But while the boy was cleaning, 3 customers came into the store. The store wasn't doing very good in the beginning. And the crystal merchant offers the boy a permanent position. And the boy's kind of given up on his dream, so he accepts. And he stays there for about a year. He keeps making changes, which keeps promoting the store and making it do better so that he can help his merchant friends to follow his own personal journey or whatever and go on a pilgrimage. I don't remember where. And the crystal merchant declines and gives all of the money back to the boy who'd been saving up for a year and says, go on your own personal mission, go see the pyramids of Egypt. And so the boy's like, okay, I'll do it. And he joins a caravan. In the caravan, he meets an Englishman who is on his own personal journey, I think searching for his personal treasures, personal something, to become an alchemist. And he's got all these science books, and he knows all these languages, and he's trying really, really hard to do it right. And he heard that in the oasis that the caravan was going to, there was a fully trained alchemist who could do all of the alchemy things. So he's like, I'm gonna go do that. And the boy's like, okay, sure, let's go. And so they join the caravan and they go, and then there's tribal wars in the desert, so they have to stay in the oasis for a little bit. And there the boy meets Fatima, which is the only other name we'll ever learn. Fatima is a girl that the boy falls in love with at first sight, which is real freaking weird. And the very next day he's like, I love you, I want to marry you. And she's like, what? So only real reaction from any characters to be like, yo, dude, you just saw me yesterday. What? And so she helps the two find the alchemist who's just south of the oasis in the desert. Why would you live there? I don't know. You're an alchemist. You can do anything. And so the Englishman goes and finds the alchemist, and the boy just sort of contemplates things. He's a really deep thinker for a shepherd. Well, I guess you'd have to be alone with yourself for that long. And so while he's in the desert, he sees 2 hawks circling, and he gets a vision. The book is all about visions and omens. And so he's like, oh, this is an omen. The tribes are going to attack the oasis. And the oasis is generally a neutral ground because that's where each tribe keeps their women and children. And so no one attacks the oasis. But he saw a vision that someone was going to attack the oasis. So he goes to the chieftain and he's like, yo, someone's gonna attack this oasis. And they're like, nah, no one is gonna attack the oasis. And then they have a little chieftain meeting with all the little people. And they're like, okay, so if you're right, then we will give you this gold. But if you're wrong, we're gonna shoot you. And he's like, okay, fine, whatever. And then on his way out to his own tent, another guy comes in and he has the 2 hawks on his shoulder. Actually, I think no, they're dead. I think he's killed the 2 hawks. And he goes, who dares read the omens of the hawks? And the guy's like, I speak the language of the world and whatever. And the guy puts the sword against the boy's head, and he's like, you risk your life for blah blah blah. And the boy doesn't back down. And then the man is like, come see me in my tent. It's to the south of the oasis after all of this is done, if you survive. Turns out that people did attack the oasis. Everyone died. They killed everyone except the leader, who was like, yo, my people were hungry. We thought we would attack the oasis so we could join the battle. He's like, oh, sorry man, sorry for killing all your people, but we're gonna have to kill you too, but not an honorable death in fight. We're gonna hang you from a tree where the children can throw rocks at you. What? Anyway, that happened. And the boy's like, oh, I met the alchemist. And so he goes and he talks to the alchemist, and the alchemist is like, what are you doing? You're being stalled on your personal journey. And the boy's like, but I met this lovely woman and there's tribes fighting, and so I can't go any further. And the alchemist is like, you're wrong. So sell your camel, buy a horse, because camels are traitorous. They die too fast without any warning. And he's like, the boy's like, yeah, okay, sure, chill, I'll just do that. He comes back the next day with a horse, and they go off into the desert with a falcon, and the falcon brings them food. Where are they getting water? I don't know, not mentioned, but whatever. The falcon brings them food. They meet up with both tribes. They tell both tribes the same story, that one's an alchemist and one's a boy who's trying to see the pyramids. The first tribe lets them go. The second tribe's like, oh, we saw you with the first tribe and you're spies, so we're gonna kill you. And the the man's like, the boy can turn himself into the wind. And the boy's like, what? No, I can't. And the man's like, don't worry about it. You'll figure it out. Bye. And he dips out. And the boy's just like stuck in the desert. He's got no money. He's got no horses. He's just like, oh man, I gotta turn myself into the wind. What? And so he just stares into the desert. And he's given 3 days to turn into the wind. And he stares into the desert. He stares into the desert. And on the third day, the tribe is like, let's go see him turn himself into the wind. Because that's possible. And so the boy talks to the desert and he's like, you're smart. Can you help me turn into the wind? And the desert's like, nah, mate. And so he turns to the wind and he's like, yo, you're smart. You come from all over. Have you seen anybody turn into the wind? The wind's like, nah. So he's like, so does anybody know who could possibly turn me into the wind? And the desert and the wind are like, the sun. And so he's like, hey, desert, wind, work together. Block out the sun so I can speak to the heavens. And they do that and he talks to the sun and the sun's like, I've seen everything, but I've never seen that. And then the boy's like, well then who should I ask? And the sun was like, the hand that created all. And so he turns in on himself and the wind is going and the sand is going and like everything's going because he's communicating and he's just like looking in on himself and he's like, oh, the hand that created all is God and the soul of God is the soul in me and I can be the wind. And he transports himself to the other side of the sort of encampment that they've made. And everyone's like, oh shit. And the alchemist comes back from wherever he was hiding. He's like, I knew you could listen to your heart. And so they continue on with their journey and they go all the way to Egypt where they reach a monastery. No, they have to be in Egypt. They're in Egypt and they reach a monastery and the alchemist turns lead into gold, gives a quarter of it to the monk for their kindness to the pilgrims. He keeps a quarter of it for himself because he has to return to the desert. Gives a quarter of it to the boy so that he can go achieve his personal journey, go to the pyramids, find his treasure. And then he gives another quarter to the monastery for the boy, being like, if the boy chooses to come back, this is his. And then he leaves. He just dodges the hell out. And the boy goes to the pyramid and gets mobbed and beaten almost to death. His gold gets stolen and he finds nothing. He tries to dig because his heart told him, he speaks to his heart, by the way. They have like actual conversations and his heart was like, dig where your tears fall. And so he dug. And then this group of people was like, yo, give me your money. And he's like, I have no money. And they're like, you have money. And they beat him until they found his gold. And then he was like, I'm looking for my treasure. It's literally what he says. And they're like, yo, dude, this guy's got no money. He stole this. Why? And they run away. But the man's like, why are you looking for your treasure here? And the boy was like, because I had a dream. He's like, I had a dream once that there's treasure for me underneath an old tree in a rundown monastery, but I'm not dumb enough to follow that dream just because I had it more than once. And the boy's like, I know now. And they leave him bleeding on the desert floor. When he finally pulls himself together, he returns to the monastery, he picks up his gold, he returns to Spain, back to where he had his sheep the first time, and he digs underneath the tree that gave him the dream in the first place. Like, that's where he had the dream in the beginning. He digs underneath that tree and he finds his treasure. And then he goes to God, you old sorcerer, you knew it was here the whole time and yet you made me go on that journey anyway. And God was like, yo, but you had to see the pyramids, right? They're beautiful. And then Fatima sends him a kiss on the wind and he goes, I'm coming, Fatima. And then that's where the book ends. So I am sure there's some kind of religious story that this is mimicking or mirroring or whatever that I just don't get. And I have never highlighted so many quotes in a book, but I love it so much and I want to use the same, not the same exact arc, but the idea behind the arc for a story that I have stuck in my head. I want to use some of those ideas because I think they're really good, really poetic, and really, really true. They apply to real life. And again, I think the story is trying to tell me something and I just didn't pick it up because I'm ignorant. But I'm not about to read the Bible to figure it out because I'm not going to understand it. That's something that needs to come from like a conversation or something. So, hey Megan, hit me up. You know the Bible. Or Marley, y'all know the Bible. So essentially, that's The Alchemist. I loved it. I would give it 4 out of 5 stars just because like it hooked me. It's a little bit short and I don't think everyone will understand it. I also don't think it's a book for everyone. I think it's a book for people who are interested not in improving themselves, but along that same line where they're interested in a different worldview, because it makes you think about the way you think about yourself and you think about the world and what you're doing as yourself in the world, which is kind of difficult to get through if you're not into that kind of thinking. So I really enjoyed it. If you've read The Alchemist, let me know below. If you've read anything else by the author, Paulo Coelho, let me know, and let me know what you think I should read next. Right now, next on my list is Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, so that's what I'm gonna read next, but if you have any other suggestions for me to splash in there, let me know in the comments down below. I'll see you guys next week. Or not, who knows? It's crazy in the world right now. Bye!